It started with a signature I never gave. One morning I sat alone at the breakfast table, sunlight filtering through the sheer curtains, when a courier knocked at the door. A thick envelope, legal documents, confusing at first, then damningly clear. My eldest son had filed to declare me mentally incompetent. Apparently I was paranoid, erratic, and unfit to manage my estate. I dropped the papers. My hands trembled. My mouth went dry. I was 76. Yes, slower than I once was, sure, but I had spent my entire life building this home, this fortune, this family. And now my own children were saying I'd lost my mind? I knew something had shifted in recent months, the way they spoke to me like I was made of glass, the awkward pauses when I walked into the room. I thought it was age. I thought they were just concerned. I never imagined betrayal. But here it was, in ink, in signatures, in betrayal disguised as protection. I could have fought them immediately. I could have called every lawyer in my phone. Instead, I stayed very still and decided to play along. My name is Edward Salas. I built a manufacturing company from nothing, worked my fingers raw in my 20s, had employees in the hundreds by my 40s. I retired at 65 with more money than I'd ever dreamed of, a paid-off estate and 2 grown children, Martin and Camille. People say I was intimidating in my prime, sharp, direct, stubborn, but also fair. I kept every promise I made, provided well, gave my kids everything they needed, spoiled them maybe, but I thought that's what a father should do. After their mother died, I gave even more. And maybe that's when the shift happened, when grief softened me and they saw a chance. Looking back, I can't help but wonder how long the signs had been there, waving like red flags, while I looked the other way. Camille used to call every morning after dropping the kids off at school. Sometimes she'd just chat about mundane things, the weather, a new recipe, the latest drama with the PTA. Those calls had a rhythm, a comforting cadence that made me feel included. But over the last year, they thinned out, then stopped. She blamed it on stress, the kids, work. But it was more than that. There was a distance, the kind that didn't just come from missed phone calls. Martin was worse. He had always been the quieter of the two, more reserved, more calculating. He'd check in like clockwork, always polite, but he started skipping our Sunday calls. When I asked about it, he said, "Dad, it's not that I don't care. I just don't think you remember half the things we talk about anymore." That stung, but I brushed it off. Maybe I had repeated myself once or twice. Nothing serious. Still, I began noticing small, uncomfortable things. Camille brought over a pill organizer and filled it herself, even though I never asked. "It's just easier this way," she said with a smile too tight to be sincere. Martin showed up one day with a manila envelope. "Just routine estate planning paperwork," he said. "All the guys at work are doing it for their parents." He handed me a power of attorney form. I read the top of the page, my fingers trembling. I asked him why. He said, "In case of an emergency. But emergencies don't usually require you to give up total control over your life." I didn't sign. He looked disappointed. The truth? I wanted to believe they were just trying to help, that I was misreading things, that the unease coiling in my gut was just paranoia. I had loved them for too long, too deeply, to believe they would hurt me. But love I would learn, can blind you more than hate ever could. The betrayal wasn't a single moment. It was a slow, calculated dismantling of trust, like someone quietly emptying a room of furniture until you suddenly realize you're sitting on a bare floor. It started with a phone call. "Dad, I think you should see a specialist," Camille said. "You've been forgetting things. Martin and I are worried." I told her I was fine, that everyone forgets things from time to time. I was 76, not 90. She pressed. "Just a quick consult, nothing serious." Out of love or guilt, I agreed. The doctor's office was small and unfamiliar. No diplomas on the wall. A nurse with a fake smile handed me a clipboard with pre-filled answers. "Just a formality," she said. It wasn't. That wasn't even my primary physician. Later, I would find out the doctor had been referred by Martin's law firm, a paid actor in a medical coat. 2 weeks after that appointment, I received the documents. A petition to declare me mentally incompetent, signed and submitted to court. I stared at my children's signatures for hours. They said I was paranoid, that I was confusing dates, that I had shown episodes of verbal aggression and was financially impulsive. Lies, all of it. But what hurt most was that they hadn't come to me first. They hadn't talked to me, challenged me, confronted me as adults. They'd gone behind my back, plotted in shadows, and tried to take control under the guise of love. I sat alone in the study for hours that night, my fingers curled around the arms of my leather chair like a man gripping the edge of a cliff. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This wasn't just betrayal. It was an execution. I became a ghost in my own home. For weeks after reading the court documents, I wandered through rooms that once held meaning, photos of family vacations, my wife's piano, birthday cards from the grandkids, and I felt none of it. Camille came over more often, smiling too brightly, speaking too slowly. "Have you eaten today, Dad? Did you remember to take your pills?" I began answering her with blank stares and delayed responses. Martin started handling my mail. Bills disappeared from the table. He claimed they were on auto pay now. He insisted I stop driving. The car was too much responsibility. They thought I was slipping. They wanted to believe it, so I gave them what they wanted. I shuffled when I walked, repeated questions, stared off into the distance during conversations. I became forgetful, conveniently. They started talking in front of me like I wasn't there, about plans for the estate. Martin joked once that the house could fetch a fortune if Dad's room was converted into an office. Camille laughed, and I just smiled inside. They had no idea. One night, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at the man they thought was broken. I was thinner. My eyes were hollow. But behind him was a fire I had not felt in years. I had spent my whole life solving problems, turning small factories into industry leaders, navigating lawsuits, negotiating mergers. Yet here I was, letting 2 scared children make me feel like a dying man. No more. I pulled out an old notebook and began writing. Dates, conversations, inconsistencies. I practiced walking straight again, speaking clearly in private. I read books I had once loved. My mind was sharp, my will sharper. They thought they were writing the final chapter of my life. I was just beginning the next act. I contacted my old lawyer, Rafael Mendez, a man I hadn't needed in years but had always respected. I told him everything. He didn't flinch. "We'll need documentation," he said. "Video, audio, witnesses. You'll need to keep playing along until we have enough." So I did. I installed hidden cameras in the study, kitchen, and living room. I recorded every conversation with Martin and Camille, every time they mentioned the estate, every time they spoke of me like a problem to be managed. I hired a nurse, Sophia, an old friend's daughter, pretending to be my caregiver. She was kind, smart, and discreet. She watched everything, reported everything. Camille showed her the new will she and Martin had drafted, one that left everything to them and locked me out of financial decisions. "Dad will never know," Camille said. She was wrong, and I was patient. I invited them to dinner on a rainy Sunday. They were all smiles. Camille brought wine. Martin carried a manila folder. "Let's review some papers," he said after dinner. "We're just trying to simplify things, Dad." I played dumb, blinked slowly. "Which papers?" Camille smiled like I was 5. "Just a few legal things. We want to make sure you're protected." I asked them to read them aloud. As Martin droned on about revocable trusts and power of attorney, I watched their eyes. No shame, just efficiency. It wasn't greed that drove them. It was fear. Fear of being left with nothing. Fear of the mess death brings. Fear of me leaving them without a safety net. But in trying to protect themselves, they had destroyed me. I nodded slowly, took the papers. "I'll think about it," I said. They smiled, thinking I was slipping again. But the court date was already set. The courtroom smelled like wood polish and old paper, strangely sterile for a place where so many lives change. I sat at the plaintiff's table in a charcoal suit I hadn't worn in years, my tie slightly crooked but my spine straight. I looked older, sure, but not fragile, not broken, not the man they had painted in their reports. Camille and Martin were already seated across the aisle, whispering in hushed tones with their lawyer. Camille caught my eye for a moment, and her smile faltered. Martin gave me a quick, dismissive nod as if this were just another formality. They had no idea what was coming. The judge, a woman in her 50s with sharp features and no time for nonsense, called the court to order. My lawyer Raphael stood up first. He spoke calmly, efficiently, laying out a timeline of manipulation and deceit. The fake psychiatric evaluations, the forged notes, the power of attorney requests, the hidden recordings. Then came the video evidence. On screen, Martin's voice echoed through the courtroom. "Dad won't even remember this conversation. He's basically gone. We should just get everything signed before he slips completely." Camille laughed in the background. "Once the estate's in our name, we can move him to the condo. He won't know the difference." Silence followed. The judge looked visibly disturbed. Even the clerk beside her raised an eyebrow. Camille buried her face in her hands. Martin stared at the floor. Then came Sophia's testimony. She appeared via video, composed and clear, stating exactly what she had witnessed: manipulation, gaslighting, exploitation masked as care. Camille's lawyer tried to object. The judge waved it off. "You've made serious allegations here," the judge said, turning to Camille and Martin. "Allegations intended to strip your father of his autonomy, dignity, and legal rights, and yet the evidence suggests you both acted with deliberate intent to mislead this court." She turned to me. "Mr. Salas, do you wish to address the court?" I stood, every joint in my body resisting, but my voice steady. "I raised them to be strong, to be better than me. Somewhere along the way, fear and greed took root. But I am not incompetent. I am not gone. I'm still here, and I will not be erased." The courtroom was silent. The judge ruled swiftly. The guardianship petition dismissed. All powers of attorney and wills filed during the investigation revoked. Martin and Camille barred from managing any of my assets without court oversight for the foreseeable future. The gavel dropped. I had won. But as I looked across the courtroom and saw my children, silent, pale, ashamed, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt the weight of everything we'd lost. The betrayal had been exposed. Justice had been served. But the family we once were That was gone. And what came next would not be dictated by court orders, but by what we chose to do now, in the aftermath. Some battles end with bloodshed. Mine ended with quiet. After the court ruling, the phone stopped ringing. The house, once filled with Camille's busy footsteps and Martin's clipped commands, settled into stillness. I expected to feel satisfied, vindicated, but all I felt was tired. I spent the first few days walking the perimeter of my garden, hands in my coat pockets, staring at the wilting azaleas and fallen leaves. They'd always been Camille's favorite flower, back when she was 10 and thought they were magical. I thought about my wife, gone more than a decade now. What would she have said about all of this? Would she have blamed them? Me? Both? I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because the hurt had gone deeper than tears. It had calcified into something more permanent, a silent ache I carried like a second heart. I began rebuilding, not my estate, but myself. Every morning I woke at dawn, brewed strong black coffee, and wrote in the same notebook I'd used to document their betrayal. Now, instead of evidence, I filled its pages with reflections, pain, gratitude, even hope. One entry read, "You can love someone and still guard yourself from them. Boundaries aren't walls, they're gates. You decide who comes through and when." I wasn't trying to erase what had happened. I was trying to grow around it. Eventually, Camille reached out again. We met on neutral ground, an old cafe where she used to do her homework after school. She sat across from me, stirring her tea, eyes rimmed with guilt and hope. "I still don't know why I did it," she said. "I told myself it was about protecting you, but I think I was trying to protect myself. From your death, from the uncertainty, from being left with nothing." I listened, not because I forgave her immediately, but because she needed to be heard. "We didn't know how to talk to you anymore," she added. "You always seemed so in control. We were scared, and we handled that fear in the worst way possible." I looked her in the eye. "I wasn't asking for control," I said. "I was asking for respect." She nodded, biting her lip. "I want to earn it back," she whispered. Martin came around too, slower, more awkwardly. He brought my favorite whiskey and stood at the door like a boy waiting for punishment. "I'm not going to pretend I wasn't wrong," he said, "but I'm not proud of who I became." "I'm not either," I replied. He blinked. "You didn't do anything wrong." I gave him a long look. "I did. I stopped talking to you like you were my son. I started talking like a man protecting his assets." We sat on the porch that night and drank in silence. The apology wasn't wrapped in flowers or fancy words. It just existed in the space between us. Sometimes that's enough to start again. A few months later, I invited them both over for dinner. No legal talk, no estate updates, just a meal. We laughed, cautiously at first, then more freely. Camille showed me photos of the kids. Martin asked if I remembered how to play chess. I did, and I beat him twice. There was healing, yes, but not a return to what once was. And that was okay. Now I spend my mornings walking the garden path, breathing the stillness in. I've added a clause in my will, not about the estate or the money, just one line. Forgiveness is the final wealth. Pass it on.